Hello there, I'm Chris, and today I want to talk about making it easier to debug web applications in Visual Studio Code. Specifically, I want to talk about context switching and how to avoid it. But what does that mean? As web developers, we work in three different contexts. We write our code in the editor, we check if everything works and tweak it in the browser, and we deal with version control and deployment in the terminal. In essence, we use three different tools, each for one task. This may not seem like much, but it is a cognitive overhead that impacts our developer efficiency. As web developers, we're used to this, but people coming from other platforms to the web expect one IDE to do all of that. This makes the web look harder and the tooling part of it not up to par. With browser developer tools, we took a first step to remove one of the context switches, making it shorter to go from testing to editing. You may not know it, but there's a browser developer tools editor built inside developer tools. In addition to tweaking individual CSS settings, you can activate a link to the style sheet. This opens it up in an editor. You can set up workspaces, you can add files and folders, and you have a breakpoint debugging environment for scripts right in the browser. Now, the usage of this feature is, let's call it suboptimal. The visual tools, however, to tweak and debug CSS issues are a roaring success. So much so that we keep improving them to offer accessibility and compatibility insights and offer new features like typography and CSS grids debugging. In the editor space, Visual Studio Code has taken an excellent step towards aligning coding and deployment. With an integrated terminal, Git support and linting options, you don't have to switch between editor and terminal any longer. If you haven't looked into it yet, the Web Hint extension is an excellent way to make sure you don't make obvious mistakes, and that way you don't have to jump between the browser and the editor any longer to see what you've done wrong. A lot has changed in the browser space since the days of Netscape and Internet Explorer. Browsers can be fully automated using WebDriver. Browsers are also embeddable into other applications as web views. And probably one of the biggest success factors of Visual Studio Code is that it allows for extensions, making you do functionality that it doesn't have yet. So why don't we merge the efforts of Visual Studio Code and Edge to cut down on context switching? We've done exactly that, and we call it an extension called Microsoft Edge Tools for VS Code extension. Yes, it's a mouthful, but that's what we have to do. It's been quite a success so far, and we have a lot more plans for it. That's why we need your feedback, and I'm here to tell you about it. This is what it looks like. You open the extension, you connect to a new browser instance, and you get a browser right inside Visual Studio Code with the developer tools already open. You can use the visual tools to tweak the styles, and the changes reflect in your source code. Or you can activate the style sheet links in the CSS pane and edit inside Visual Studio Code. You're staying in one editor, you don't have to jump between the browser and the editor any longer just to tweak things with the CSS editor. So what you can do right now with this extension is expect, edit, and tweak the DOM structure of the product you built using the tools that you're using in the browser every day. Inspect network requests, interact with the browser inside VS Code. This is a real browser, this is not a stream or a cast, this is interactive. You can sync changes with your code if you set up source maps and watchers. And you can choose the version of Edge you want to have in the tool, not only Canary, but also the stable or the dev build. You can choose an own browser window or a headless version. This is the one you just saw that is embedded in the editor. The other one is an extra window you can use on a secondary monitor if you wanted to, for example. It wouldn't be VS Code Day if it didn't give you more insights than things you can read. So I just want to talk about a few things that we learned building this extension. The developer tools are a complex interface, and we need to make them keyboard and screen reader accessible. Anything we build inside Microsoft has to be accessible so it can get out of experimental status. It was hard enough to make an interface like that keyboard accessible and screen reader accessible. But when you embed this interface into an iframe in an extension in yet another tool, it gets much harder. So if you think about that, take a look at what we've done, because we found a few things that really worked there. There are also quite some differences in the keyboard handling between Mac and PC. So copying and pasting didn't work until we had to actually replicate that and do something ourselves. And macOS doesn't like browser windows in the background. That's why we came up with the headless mode. Any browser window that was in the background but was not visible, didn't have any of its pixels visible on screen, was set by macOS as inactive. So it reported as inactive in the developer tools extension as well, which wasn't the thing that we wanted to have. The Chromium version of Electron always lags a few versions behind the browsers. So that is not a fault of VS Code or Electron, that is just the way it is. So if you want to use bleeding edge functionality that is just new in the browsers, you probably have to wait some versions of the developer tools to use them inside VS Code. That's something you just have to deal with at the moment. The feature history of what we put inside the VS Code extension was based on user feedback and research. So the first thing was the Elements tool, because everybody uses that one. Then we added the Network tool, and then we realized that it's kind of hard to contribute to the extension because you have to build the whole of Chromium. So we changed the architecture to only build the things that are needed, make it much easier for you to contribute now to the extension. We allowed for any version of Edge. Previously it was only Canary, now you can use all of them. And we added the Edge driver as a dependency. Before that, you had to install the Edge driver as another extension just to make it work. Now this is bundled and automatically happens for you. We added the headless mode because that's something that macOS had an issue with, and it's actually quite cool to have the browser directly in the editor. And we made theming possible. Right now it's dark and light. We're not matching the theme from VS Code. That's something that's kind of tough, but we're working on it as well. So what's next? I want you to tell us. This is an open source project and it's available on GitHub. We deal with all your feature requests and user interaction there. We love to hear from you and see what you can come up with. And the features of this extension are driven by user requests and telemetry of the browser developer tools. So if you use things in the browser, that will probably end up on our plate as well. And this is great because we want to build things that people need. So please tell us what's missing. I'm saying that I'm just doing things that you tell me, but here's something I want you to think about and give me feedback if that's a good idea. One idea we have right now is to make yet another context switch unnecessary. It's great that you can already inspect network traffic in the browser developer tools. But when things go wrong with an API call, you still have to use a third-party tool or the terminal. Why is that a 404? Why is the right data not coming back? That's why we added an experiment that allows you to edit and resend any network request in the developer tools. That's right now available in the browser. Editing the request opens the network console, which allows you to tweak the request parameters, set authentication options, or even import API collections and environments. That way you can fix any API issue directly in Visual Studio Code. What do you think? Tell us on GitHub. And that's all we got time for. I'm Chris Heilmann, this is my team. You can reach us on the various Twitter accounts there, and I'd love for you to give the Developer Tools extension a spin and tell us what you think. So please come to GitHub and work with us. Thank you.